Sorry, I couldn't beat the timer. When we left off, Mrs. Kinker had come and taken a bunch of things, and Hattie was really mad at her, and because it seemed like her mom and aunt didn't really care. It says, later again, there are more and more buffalo. There are so many that the herds look like a dark stain moving over the hills. The droppings are flat, full of just dried grass, and make good coal, but it takes nearly a bushel of them to make a decent cooking fire. I would rather pick up twigs and logs than buffalo poop, but this is what we must do. As long as they're not fresh and gooey, it's not so bad. Things they do, you guys. The boys, including my naughty brother Jake, spend much of their chore time throwing these buffalo chips at each other like a snowball fight instead of actually helping. They also think it's fun to ambush us girls, but I think it's nasty. Pepper and I feel nervous when we go out to gather the chips. The other day, 2 horsemen were watching from a distance, so we told our fathers, who told the rest of the men. Now everybody has to ride with loaded guns. Scares me to think anybody's following us. Maybe the women are nice. Native American women, but men, they're carrying weapons. I don't trust them. This confuses me because they're also carrying weapons. Maybe they don't trust them. Vice versa. I walk alongside Wade's wagon with Pepper. She and I sing to him Yankee Doodle and other songs. We feel silly, but maybe he'll wake up. Remember, he's still asleep from that hemlock poison. He's swallowing the broth that she spins into his mouth, and his arms no longer shake or stiffen. Mrs. Lewis and her friends look in on him constantly, and I will say he's the most prayed-over boy that I've ever met. Evening time. The sun is scorching hot. Ma insists that I wear my bonnet to protect my face, but the cloth itches my scalp. Tall Joe said that up here soon the routes will meet at Fort Laramie, and like it or not, we'll be traveling alongside other people and 73 wagons. Pepper and I plan to meet the children. Later that day. There's so much celebration today, tears of joy. After 3 full days of sleeping, felt like forever. Wade sat up, looked around and said, Mother, I am hungry as a bear. Just like that. Pepper and I joined hands with Gideon and the little Anderson girls and Jake and Benny, and we danced around Wade's wagon and we sang, and Mrs. Lewis cried and cried, and she's so thankful that her son is healed. And he's too weak to walk. But his father carried him down to the river's edge to a sandy beach, bathed him, and helped him dress into clean clothes. And now Wade's sitting in the shade wearing a blue shirt and pants. I'm so glad to see his beautiful green eyes again. Pepper can't stop giggling. She's so happy her brother's okay. She sits by him and just talks and talks. Another day. Clouds build up like white towers. Then, in the afternoon, they turn black. Nearly every day we hear the low rumblings of thunder, and we feel heavy drops of rain, enough to settle the dust and coat the wheels with mud, but no downpour. We see mighty herds of buffalo in the distance to either side of the trail. Often there are men on horseback moving along a ridge. If Indians are following us, they're keeping their distance. Maybe they're just curious and they don't plan to kill us, but I'm still scared. This morning I read back through this journal and I laughed when I saw what I'd written about Boonville. I'm afraid of only 4 things. Ma says that people who are thinkers often change their opinions. It means that you're growing. So here's what I think now. Some things I was afraid of, I'm not afraid now, and the other way around. I'm not so scared about snakes anymore. I've not had a toothache, and the Indians haven't hurt us. Even Benny and Jake don't worry me so much. They are much stronger on their legs, and they stay close to the wagon. So here's my new list of things. I'm afraid of hemlock, and I'm afraid of fast rivers. That is all. Later, Wade walked today. He walked for about 15 minutes. He steps slow and he gets tired easily, and when we ask if he remembers what happened, he squints and he looks up at the sky. Nope, he says after a while. He knows we're on our way to Oregon, and he does remember being on a riverboat some time ago. He knows his family, and today he said my name. He said, Hattie, your cheeks are sunburned. Then he smiled at me. At noon, we sat by a stream where it was shady, and Aunt June and Mrs. Anderson, they've become such close friends, and the 4 girls are like having my very own sisters again. Ma helps care for baby Eliza May. We were cooling our feet in the water when we heard loud voices arguing. 2 men were yelling words I won't repeat, and I ran through the grass and saw that Mr. Kinker had a pistol pointed at Tall Joe, and there was Mrs. Kinker, her hands on her hips, also yelling. Tall Joe yanked off his beaver hat and threw it to the dirt. 15 miles a day is what we'll do, like it or not, he said, his face 2 inches away from Mr. Kinker's. Spit came out. He was so mad. And the next time you point a gun at me, mister, I'll slice your ears off. Don't you forget it. Mrs. Kinker piped in, How dare you speak to my husband that way? We're just poor old people looking to start a new life, and you're nothing but a liar who stinks to high heaven. I don't know why we ever let you be our leader. Tall Joe's eyes narrowed. And you, he said, pointing his finger at her, you bother me worse than a corpse on a hot day. What's going on here? There's a lot happening, guys. Sorry, it's early morning. There we go. Corpse on a hot day. He grabbed Mr. Kinker's pistol and aimed it at their wagon seat where a pie was cooling. The first shot made the pan spin. The second splattered the pie. Mrs. Kinker's hands flew up in shock. And what she screamed at Tall Joe, I ain't repeating that neither. Pa later told us that the Kinkers have been pestering Tall Joe to slow down because they're plumb wore out, and the mister has something wrong with his backside, so it hurts him to sit so many hours driving their team. And she don't like the bugle going off at 4 o'clock every morning, and there's too many grandchildren, and so on and so on, one complaint after another. But, hello, we're on the trail. I was so upset to see old people get yelled at. They must be 50 years of age. Even though I don't trust Mrs. Kinker and I don't like him, she sometimes still reminds me of my grandmother. At least the way she looks, I mean. I don't want to see her yelled at. Last week in May, I think. In the far distance, we can see something poking up from the horizon like a thumb pointing at the clouds. Does that remind us of anything? Tall Joe says this is Chimney Rock. It's the closest thing to a mountain that I've ever seen. The woman who had a baby back in Ash Hollow died of a fever this morning. She was buried on a bluff overlooking the beautiful valley. Her newborn daughter is being cared for by another mother, and friends are helping the father with his 3 little boys. Chimney Rock. This is a real place. It's pretty cool. We can Google Maps it. For 2 long days, we approached Chimney Rock. It seemed to take forever. 2 evenings, we watched the sunset behind it as we ate supper. Now that we're here, it's a curious sight. Actually, a huge pile of rocks with what looks like a stone chimney rising up from its center. Jake and several boys hiked around its base and counted 10,000 steps. I don't know how they kept track of so many numbers, but they did. Tall Joe said some other folks counted years past, and they also said about 10,000. Boys with rifles are shooting at the top of Chimney Rock to see what will happen. They like the fuss and the noise. Now, some families have souvenir chips tucked into their wagons. The plains are dry with no trees, and we're slowly moving toward the Pacific Ocean, but it's nearly impossible for me to picture a sea other than this sea of grass. All around me is open space with colors of gold, green, and brown. I feel like we're specks, like bugs crawling across a kitchen floor. It's very pretty, but I miss the sight and the smell of trees, and I do miss the Missouri River. To think I might never again hear the long, high whistle of a steamboat makes me feel so lonesome. Scotts Bluff. I've never seen a real castle, but today we passed what Pa says looks like a castle. On the side of the trail, high above us, rose a sharp wall of stone called Scotts Bluff. Jake wanted to climb it when he saw some older boys trying to, but Ma held his shirt and said no. The bluff hugs the river so close that we had to steer the wagons aside, pull around it up a rocky ridge. Tall Joe said this place was named after the fur trader Hegram Scott, who got sick and was abandoned by his companions. He crawled over 60 miles trying to find them. When the trappers came this way again, they found his skeleton and what was left of his boots right here. This morning, after we were on the trail for an hour, a boy playing with his father's gun accidentally shot our front ox in the head. That ox dropped dead so quick, the ones behind stumbled onto it, and what a tangle of hooves and harnesses it was. Pa was so mad, he stormed over to the boy, grabbed the gun, and threw that gun into the river. You could have killed one of my children, young man. I've never seen Pa so red in the face. I ran to Jake and Benny, even though I knew they were safe, and I gathered them to me like I was an old hen. That boy made me so mad that after supper, I marched over and I kicked him hard, in the leg, twice. 60 miles until we reach Fort Laramie. 4 days if we push it. Later that night, thunder and lightning and heavy winds. Rain turned to sleet and then hail. I scolded Jake for throwing hailstones at another boy who ran over to his mama crying. Imagine camping in that. Yikes. Fort Laramie. When Fort Laramie drew into sight, I felt shaky. Indians were camped everywhere, but I looked at them careful and I didn't see anything troubling brewing. They were mostly families, it seemed like. Tall Joe said we're now in the middle of the Sioux compound, Sioux country, and this is the biggest trading post around. It's built from logs and it's owned by the American Fur Company. There are dozens of trappers and mountain men dressed in beaded leather and skins and living in teepees. Many seem to be married to Native American women, for there are lots of children playing among the tents. We're staying here for 2 nights and 1 entire day so that folks can make repairs to their wagons and buy new supplies. A Frenchman runs this place. Way on the other side of the river, we can see that Brigham Young's camp. The trail, such as it is, ends so that they must cross to our side. Remember, those are the people on the other side of the river with the children that they wanted to play with. The Frenchman has a flat boat. For $15, he'll ferry their wagons across. $15 is an absolute fortune, but Pa says that the river is deep here, so it's worth it for them to pay. We were already on the trail again before the Mormons crossed over, so I reckon they'll be traveling in our dust. There are signposts every few miles. These are messages written on pieces of board stuck in the sand, also buffalo skulls with writing on them. Some notes are impossible to read because the sun has bleached out the ink or rain smeared it, but there are warnings of bad water, rattlesnakes near, and danger, like this one that says, Willie Henderson and 2 others died here. June 1846, buffalo stampede. So just a year before. We're going to stop there.